Hi, folks. I'm Kirk Lakes, and I'm here to talk to you today about Stadia. We're going to provide a brief overview of Stadia and talk about some of our recent updates. And then I'll talk a little bit about our Stadia Makers program, which is a program focused on helping more indie developers bring their games to Stadia. So as I mentioned, my name's Kirk. I've been in the industry well over 10 years now, mostly working at platforms on things like marketing, business development, game partnerships. And now I work on our Stadia team, focused on game partnerships, content acquisition, and working specifically on our Stadia Makers program portfolio, helping more indie developers bring their games to Stadia. So to talk first a little bit about Stadia, we launched in November of 2019. And when we did, we really wanted to showcase that a streaming platform could actually play AAA, 4K, 60 frames a second, HDR games, and have the same experience like you were playing them locally. And we've done that really well. I think that's landed with our users. We've seen that in our user satisfaction scores. Folks are really happy with the technical experience that they're having. And so a big focus for us now is just continuing to bring more games and roll out more new features to really take advantage of the platform. But another aspect of Stadia is, playing on the devices that you already own. So with Stadia, there's no hardware required that you have to purchase up front. You can play on your living room TV, you can play on your existing computer, your laptop, your phone. And we've recently added iOS devices, so now you can even play Stadia on your iPhone. And a big reason that we built the platform the way we did is we really wanted to remove barriers for discoverability when it comes to games. So if a user wants to try a game, they can just jump right in and play it, but it's also much easier for folks to discover games that they don't have to purchase a dedicated gaming console just up front. And of course, we just want people to have the time that they have to play games spent playing games. There's no downloads, there's no updates, there's no waiting for games to install on your machine. If you have 15 minutes to play a game, we want you to be able to jump right in. And I think that works really well with Stadia, and we're happy to hear that our users are using it that way as well. So as I mentioned, a big focus for us now is just continuing to add more games to Stadia. With well over 90 games already available on Stadia, and we continue to add more every month. There's really a good variety in the portfolio. We have the biggest games like Cyberpunk or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Mortals Phoenix Rising. But we also have a lot of indie games on there as well, and we have partnerships with folks like Tequila Works on Guilt. So definitely a variety of games in the portfolio, and I'll talk a little bit more about how important the indie developers are to us here in a second. First, I just want to make sure folks understand how purchasing games work on Stadia. So yes, we do have a Stadia Pro subscription. And the way that works is you subscribe, you have instant access to free games. There's about 30 games available in there right now. And you claim the games you want. So if you claim a game any given month, as long as you remain a Stadia Pro subscriber, you'll always have access to that game. You'll never lose it. Even if the game is removed from the subscription at some point, as long as you've claimed it, you'll be able to play it as long as you remain a subscriber. But the other part of Stadia is that you can just buy games normally like any other digital storefront. I know sometimes folks don't fully understand this, but if there's a game you want, let's say Cyberpunk, for example, you can just buy that game, you then own it, and you're free to play it across all your devices without having to pay any subscription fee of any kind. But when we're talking about games, I mentioned this at the top, something that's really important to myself and many folks on our team here at Stadia is bringing more indie developers and their games to our platform. When we originally launched Stadia in November 2019, we had more folks apply to be a Stadia developer than we could actually work with at the time. So we spent a lot of time really improving our internal systems and building out some programs that allow us to work with more developers and help them bring their games to the platform. One of those programs is Stadia Makers. So we announced Stadia Makers in March of last year at this point, so March 2020. And at its core, Stadia Makers is a program that's designed to help support development teams that are making Unity games bring their games to Stadia. There's a couple incentives I'll talk about here in a moment, but recently we announced the first 7 games that are coming as part of Stadia Makers, and we've already launched a couple by the time you're seeing this. So Unto the End came out late last year. Tuhu is launching end of January. So by the time you're seeing this, that should be out. And we're going to have a lot more Stadia Makers games to talk about this year as well. Let me talk a little bit about some of the incentives and what you get as part of the Stadia Makers program. First and foremost, one of the most important, we provide direct funding to developers who participate as part of Stadia Makers. I'll provide some feedback from some of our developers a little bit later in this presentation, but we're really happy to be able to provide this funding to help with development, porting costs, and offset some of the risk of bringing your game to a new platform. I mean, we totally understand that when you're bringing your game to a variety of platforms or even a new platform like Stadia, there's some risk involved. So we're happy to be able to offset that a little bit. And another incentive we provide is free access to development tools and hardware. So depending on your team size and structure, we can provide up to 5 physical development kits. But the other nice thing about Stadia and being a streaming cloud platform is we can actually provide cloud development access as well. So right now, given the state of the world and with teams spread out, we can provide remote access so that folks can just work on development directly in the cloud, which is a great benefit to the platform. And then I mentioned this earlier, but building your games on Unity is a part of what we look for with Stadia Makers, and that's because Unity has been a fantastic partner for us with this program. Unity is committed to providing frontline technical support for our first round of Makers partners, and they've just been fantastic in helping folks meet their milestone dates, their launch dates, and really helping folks get their games up and running on Stadia. So now I want to talk a little bit about some of the requirements and what we look for when we're seeing if a game is a good fit for Stadia Makers. So the first is you'll need to launch your game on Stadia day and date with other platforms. This means if you're launching on consoles or PC, whatever you're launching on first, you'll just need to launch on Stadia the same day that you're launching on other platforms. And then the second is you need to make sure your team is in a supported Stadia development country. The reason for this is we just need to make sure your team will have access to our Google data centers that have the Stadia instance in there, so that you're actually able to work on that during development. And then the third is you need to build your game on Unity. So you've heard me say Unity a couple of times, but given they're our partner with this program and they're helping provide technical support, we're looking right now at games that are developed on Unity and specifically developed on Unity 2019.3 or later. So one more thing that I'll mention about Stadia Makers, 7 titles announced already. We'll be announcing many more titles here this year, but I could talk about Stadia Makers till I'm blue in the face. I think what would be most impactful is to tell some of the feedback that we have some of our first Stadia Makers partners. So I'm just quoting Dima, who's the CEO of FireArt Games. The most appealing fact was that Stadia could be enjoyed by anyone with a browser without the need for a dedicated console. Again, hitting the nail on the head with what we're trying to do with Stadia. So it's always positive to hear developers say that. And some other quotes from some of our first Makers partners. Steven from 2 Ton Studios, their game's Unto the End. The funding is really nice for sure. It's let us focus on just delivering the right experience for Unto the End. And then another one of my favorites from Bruno at Fishing Cactus, who's working on Nanotale, one of our Makers titles. Because of the Makers funding, we've been able to add post-release features integrated into the initial release plan, which is always a good thing for players. So again, nothing could make us happier. If we're able to help developers realize their vision better for their initial launch, like that's exactly what we're happy to do, in addition to having the game on Stadia. So if this sounds like Stadia Makers could be a good fit for the game that you're working on, it's actually really, really easy to apply and have your game considered. Go ahead and show you exactly how to do that. So first, you're just going to go to stadia.dev/apply. You'll fill out some information about your studio, what you're working on. Once we've received that, our Makers team and myself will review the submission. If it meets the criteria and seems like it's a good fit, then we'll reach out to you and we'll talk about next steps. So again, just go to stadia.dev/apply if you're working on a game you think might be a fit for Makers, again, built on Unity. And if it's a good fit, our team will get back to you. The other thing to mention is if it's not a good fit for Makers, there's a lot of other opportunities on Stadia. We're bringing indie games and self-published titles outside of the Makers program. So we're always happy to find great games and talk about opportunities outside as well. All right, folks. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really happy to speak with you all. Next up, we'll have some of our technical team talking about developing a game for streaming platforms. And yeah, look forward to to seeing your games come to Stadia. All right, cheers.
Hi there. Thanks for checking out this brief overview for developing on Stadia. My name is Austin Speelman. I'm a technical account manager here at Google Stadia. It's a boring way of saying that I'm helping game developers bring their experiences to the platform. I've worked with many indie studios so far who've already launched titles on the platform, and working with even more to hit that stage as well. First, I'd like to quickly thank you for taking the interest and the time to check out what we have to say here. I hope that this brief overview helps provide a glimpse into some of the considerations for joining the platform. First, I think it's worth mentioning or introducing the platform for those of you who have not yet been acquainted with it, or maybe you've only briefly heard about it and have not yet had a chance to check it out. Stadia is a cloud gaming platform made by Google, in which players are able to experience the interactive media on virtually any endpoint and within just a few clicks or taps. It takes that familiar gaming experience and transports the processing requirements from the gamer's local device to the data center. This, of course, means that the video output is encoded into a data stream, which can then be decoded by the gamer's device. All the while, the player's inputs can then be captured as a sequence of device states or sent as packets back to the instance running the game. So now that I've provided a definition of what cloud gaming is, right, I can hear some of you already saying, well, this has been done before, so what's new? To that I'll say, fair question. This concept of streaming video games has been around for a couple of decades now, and gamers have had access to production implementations for at least a decade, right? And the first thing I like to point out, I think is worth mentioning, is more of an environmental variable, which is, I think, the accessibility to high-speed internet has drastically increased over the past decade, right? Now, I'm not saying it's we're currently not perfect, right? Obviously, there's still room for improvement when it comes to accessibility for high-speed internet, but I think as a whole, this is definitely enabling the industry to really become a bit more mainstream and a possibility for a lot of gamers who even 5 years ago, right, especially a decade ago, would not have been a reality. So I think that's worth pointing out. But in particular for Stadia, I think first and foremost, Google's experience, right? Their experience with networking, load balancing, things like content distribution, being able to serve, millions and billions of users, right? That helps to enable an optimal experience, not only for gamers, but also for developers, for deployment and publishing. And I'll mention more on that here in a second. And then also, I think it's worth pointing out that Stadia is more of a platform, right? Rather than viewing it as just simply a virtual machine hosting an executable in the cloud. This is because developers have access to a tailored library of features and APIs. This tends to lead and translate to a better overall experience for gamers, right? So when developers can access and leverage APIs that help mitigate, for example, varying network conditions, these types of things ultimately kind of wrap up into what I would consider more of a platform to kind of really offer a tailored experience for the end users. The other thing worth mentioning is that as a platform, it has endpoint switching, right? So you can very quickly, very seamlessly, as a gamer, as an end user, switch endpoints and not have to deal with a lot of setup to do so. So if you're enjoying some 4K gaming, HDR on your big screen at home with surround sound and all the bells and whistles on the couch, and a family member comes in and just yanks that remote and switches the channel, you can just as quickly pull it up on your smartphone, smart device, or any computer with a Chrome browser, right? That seamless experience without having to worry about adjusting bit rate settings and re-downloading or configuration. It just works. I think that in and of itself also lends itself nicely to be what I would call or as part of the definition of a platform. So let's say you're someone who is interested in bringing your game to Stadia. Well, you might be wondering, what does that look like and what are the requirements? Well, the good news is that most of you are probably already equipped to deploy your title in probably less than an hour, or even less, and if not, at least maybe a sample or hello world, right? This is largely in part due to the Stadia SDK having the requirements of Microsoft Windows 10 and Microsoft Visual Studio 2017 or 2019, And there's also a .NET requirement, but you'll likely already have that anyways if you've already installed Visual Studio with a lot of the packages dependencies for other gaming development environments. So that already lends itself nicely into a very familiar environment for a lot of game developers. And then the only other requirement then really is having Chrome, right? Google Chrome installed. You can kind of view Chrome as your console. This is basically your portal or your view into your game when you're testing and performing QA. Also, you'll want to grab the Stadia developer extension. This is a Chrome extension which allows you to basically view into your title as it's running and pull key metrics and key statistics in real time regarding things like, for example, your frame rate stability or streamer, the streaming statistics for ensuring that the network itself isn't dropping frames, for example. Also viewing input latency, other Stadia technical requirements, compliance checks. So basically, your Chrome can be viewed as your main primary console for interacting with Stadia, not only just the game, but also the partner portal, which I'll mention in a second. And the last thing is, for getting started, as I would recommend just doing a quick inventory check on what kind of middleware requirements you have for your game. Fortunately, Stadia does have support from the most popular middleware providers out there. However, obviously, you can't account for all of them. And being a Linux-based, platform, sometimes that can introduce some, dependency issues and other support issues when it comes to certain middleware. So just double check that before you get too far along and find out that a particular middleware tool that you were using is actually not supported on the platform and is causing issues and trying to overcome that blocker. So it's worth checking that out before you get too far into development within Stadia. Like I mentioned just a second ago, we have a partner portal, which is essentially a web portal for developers and publishers to perform kind of administration and project management within the web portal. So you'll start up as an organization. Your studio has its own organization page where you can check out your projects, assign users to different projects, and also manage the publishing aspect of actually launching the title on the platform, by creating storefronts and also going through technical certification and being able to retrieve your results all within the same portal. So some considerations I would say for Stadia from a more technical and game development perspective. First and foremost, you may or may not have already heard that Stadia chose Vulkan as its graphics API. So for some, that is immediately sort of a deal breaker. For some, it's a deal maker, right? Just depends on which camp you fall in. But at the moment, there is no support for other great graphics APIs. So like I said, this could be a major factor for you. I will say one of the benefits of Vulkan, though, is that it is an open cross-vendor, cross-platform API. So as a result of this, we've seen a lot of adoption over the past few years for Vulkan, just for that cross-platform capabilities. And so this has also led to some of the most popular game engines adopting Vulkan as a graphics API as well. So that leads to the next point, which is as a game developer, if you are already leveraging both either Epic's Unreal Engine 4 or Unity's 2019 LTS or higher, both of these have support for Stadia. So for those developers who are taking advantage of these engines and their features, a lot of the heavy lifting with regard to Vulkan, the graphics APIs, has already been addressed. So this can be an attractive option for those looking to start development on a new game or bringing an existing game over to the platform. So if you like the idea of either sticking to what you already know or just starting out, a lot of these engines really is just a great way to get started on the platform. And let's say you're on board, right? Your game engine's ready to go, and you're wondering, okay, so what else should I be thinking about, right? What in particular is unique or different from maybe what I'm used to with other platforms? One of the first things I like to discuss with partners is, the frame rate, right? Stable and high frame rates are a strong preference on Stadia. This is due to a multitude of reasons. As you can guess, streaming introduces a whole new set of challenges and variables Partly due because we're decoupling the actual graphics output from the instance, or the console or the box, from the end user's actual display, right? And so you're introducing a whole new network variable, as well as some other issues that can come up as a result of that. Given how the streamer relies on a relatively constant stream of frames to be encoded, then transmitted over the network, it's important to try and clamp to a set frame rate, say like 60 FPS or 30 FPS. Now, that being said, choosing 30 as a target instead of 60 can also have some compromises. This can be due to having up to double the input to eyeball latency. It also can result in having a larger size frame burst coming from for encoding, transmitting, and then decoding, which then leads to more strain on the decoder itself, running at 30 rather than 60, and also puts more a heavier reliance on the network conditions, having higher throughput in these larger bursts. And then it also results in Chrome not being able to really adapt and mitigate for network conditions quite as fast, right? When running at 30 instead of say 60 FPS. So these are some things to keep in mind. And you can try it yourself. Pull up a title on Stadia, and if you find one running at 30 and compared to 60, I think there is not just from a visual experience perspective, but also from just an overall feel of the game, right? The input latency and everything else. As great as Stadia can be when it comes to that, there's no getting around that simple mathematics and physics behind the latency issue. So something to keep in mind, and like I said, we highly recommend from the start, think about the frame rate and what you may or may not need to do to optimize for that. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning early on is the idea of accessibility. By default, we target support for the most commonly used controllers from other platforms, and then we also support the ability to remap these controls, right? We in fact encourage developers to implement the ability to remap these controls to better suit the individual needs of gamers, right? So it's something to keep in mind from the start is, obviously we have support for our Stadia controller, but we also expect support for keyboard and mouse, as well as the other popular controllers. Also, because of the endpoint support, the vast number of devices that we support as endpoints, it's important to keep in mind and factor in things like UI scaling. This is because you might one gamer can be playing your game on their really small mobile device, and then simultaneously another gamer could be playing it on a legit movie theater projector. And I've seen posts of gamers doing this and taking advantage of that portability, accessibility that Stadia offers, and it's really cool. But it's something to keep in mind early on, right? When you're starting out and you're thinking about your UI elements, keep this in mind. This could potentially lead to other considerations that you'll probably be glad that you thought about earlier on rather than later in the development life cycle. And then some of the other opportunities and unique aspects that I think are worth calling out. One is multiplayer. I think I have a feeling that we'll see some slight paradigm shifts in multiplayer backend methodology. Even to the point where I've seen more peer-to-peer models come out now, because when you can rely upon the network conditions between one game instance to another game instance, that opens up new possibilities, or things that previously were kind of viewed as less than ideal, suddenly kind of shift, and taking advantage of that intra network capacity and capabilities within a data center, a state-of-the-art data center, right? I think really enables some other possibilities. So I think that reliable, low latency connection, that concept, I think we'll see some slight shifts in some ways as cloud gaming becomes more and more adopted. And then the other aspect is things like couch co-op, right? Like, does a couch really even exist? This idea of couch co-op really even exists in a world where games are running in the cloud, right? Obviously, from the conceptual standpoint, yes, but the cool part about this is, and what I expect we'll see is with couch co-op is that there are games that previously, had implemented couch co-op and do not, say for example, offer online co-op. And so as a result, I suspect, we'll see a new slew of games coming out and offering or almost back catalog, coming back and basically re-enabling couch co-op, experiences that previously were, just tied to the couch, to that local screen. So, these are things that I think, beyond that, obviously having access to, the largest and the most popular cloud service providers, I think we'll see more integration across the board, across these popular vendors. And I know, for Stadia, for instance, GCP, Google Cloud Platform, and Stadia they already have tight integration and offer some essentially turnkey solutions to kind of tackle some of these more difficult, problems and sometimes hassles that are involved when it comes to, working with the multiplayer backend services. So I imagine we'll start to see a lot more of these coming out, but it's something to keep in mind is there's some opportunities here, right? That previously, you may not have thought of, but now that with this new shift, I think it starts to open the door to some other opportunities, but also keep in mind, also some other aspects, right? Unique aspects that maybe had not thought of. And then that leads to sort of my last point when it comes to unique aspects or opportunities is the Stadia enhanced features, right? Or CEFs. You've probably likely heard of a few of them already. For example, Stream Connect, on the topic of couch co-op. This Stream Connect enables the ability to provide a couch co-op-like experience without really having to develop around some of the drawbacks that you would traditionally see from couch co-op, such as like decreased graphical fidelity. So that's one CEF that you may have already seen implemented in a couple of games live right now in Stadia. State Share is another one. State Share, recently announced to the public is the ability to take a game state and kind of take a snapshot of that state and share it, right? Share it through co-op experiences. Gamers can share with their friends and say, hey, check out this exact scenario I just played through, and take a crack at it and see what you think. Or enabling community challenges and speedrunners, for example, being able to instead of having to worry about saved configuration files, being able to take that and instead have it just a snapshot they can just quickly pull up and run from, right? And having the same exact game state. And obviously there's different ways to leverage this and implement state share, but these are just a few examples. And there's also crowd choice and crowd play, where in a world where the console or the platform's already in the cloud, you have that luxury, right, of being able to stream. Many gamers now have a luxury of being able to stream, high quality, with a high bandwidth uplink to the popular streaming services. So this introduces some new ways, I think, for the community to interact and work with content creators. And so crowd play and crowd choice are a couple of examples of that. So I think we're going to see more and more examples of this coming in the near future as well. And the cool part is I've already seen some cases where developers have used our enhanced features in ways I don't think we even anticipated, and ended up turning out to be way cooler than I think even we had in mind. So I think that's where things get really exciting, right? Is when you start mixing and matching and really being creative about how to leverage some of these features, in your game, and sort of building gameplay mechanics to some degree around that. Starts to really open the doors for some really cool opportunities. And then this leads to my last point, which is, relatively speaking, cloud gaming is still in its infancy. I expect we'll see even more features and capabilities unlocked by this technology that were either previously impossible or prohibitive. So while it's our job here at Stadia to provide developers the tools to turn their visions into reality, ultimately it's up to the game developers to take advantage of this technology and leverage their creativity for the next generation experiences. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for the industry. And if you're interested in learning more about Stadia, I encourage you to check out stadia.dev, where you can find some more docs and how to apply to become a Stadia developer. Thanks again for taking the time, sticking with me through here to the end, and I wish you all the best. Take care.